If this is your first time watching us, what we like to do is first do an in-depth recap of the episode so that we're all on the same page before we launch into our discussion of it. And we cut that recap out, host it separately as its own video just for your viewing convenience. So if you happen to be on just that recap video, but you want to see our full thoughts, that video will be linked down in the description below. But without further ado, let us jump into episode 28 called The Staff. So we pick up right where we left off, which is this moment of Ursulon having taken Suvi's scarf and thrown it out the window because they figured out that that is what was spying on them, eavesdropping on them. So once that has been done, Ame then tells Suvi and Ursulon about what she had just seen through the fox's eyes, which was this argument between Marara and Indri, and how they basically knew Ame knew what was up with them basically trying to kill her essentially and get rid of her station. And so they have kind of this heated exchange and they split ways, basically saying like, time's running out, like we gotta figure this out. So Suvi, basically her immediate thoughts are, I need to get back on that apprentice Neef that gave me this scarf. Like she needs to get what's coming to her, but they're like, that can wait for now, we got more important things. And Ursulon chimes in and says, hey, by the way, Suvi, why was the wizard Straw crying when I, saw her? And Suvi's like, what? Like, I didn't know that. I'm not sure. I guess I maybe need to go check in with my people. And it's at this point that Brennan asks Erika for a stealth check for the fox. And she rolls really well. So Ame then shares vision with the fox once more and can see that he is hiding underneath a pile of stars. He is in the library of stars that Suvi was in earlier. And Indri is in here as well. And she's basically waving her hand, and that massive telescope starts to shift and look up towards the heavens, and the dome opens up. And then basically starlight starts like pouring in kind of through this telescope. And what's interesting is that the stars, or she's basically like gaining more stars, but the stars in the sky don't disappear, they remain. So it's basically kind of like taking water from a well, is how Brennan describes it. So after that process happens, Indri then says morning wren song, and all of these stars start to like float up from the different wells in the room. And she starts like plucking certain ones and then places one in the middle of like this central well. And when that happens, this kind of like imagery starts to appear, essentially a memory, as if she's viewing a memory. And basically, it's the memory of the stars, as we come to find out. And in this memory, there is a beautiful young woman wearing a kind of patchwork blue hat, walking in a courtyard alongside Indri. And Indri looks the exact same as she looks right now. And what we find out is that this young witch is Grandmother Wren, Morning Wren Song. And this is a memory of her first coming to the keep of the world's heart at Indri's castle. And she basically, Indri in the memory says, my deepest condolences, my sweet sister. And Indri in real time is kind of watching this memory, and she touches it and then it ends. And she kind of picks up that star that again, and everything goes away. She waves her hand, everything returns to its place, and Indri walks out of the library. We then cut back to Ame, who kind of tells the others what she saw and is like, hey, we need to go to this library and check out what other memories we might be able to see. And Suvi's like, oh yeah, I know where that is. And at this point, everyone kind of goes their separate ways for now, because Suvi wants to go check in with her wizard friends. So she leaves, grabs her scarf from outside, and then heads back to her cadre. Ursulon and Ame stay where they are because Ame wants to investigate what else is in this keep, if there's anything else that's been left by any of her predecessors. And she looks around, doesn't really find anything, but she wonders if there are other, if the other witches that used to be in the Coven of Elders had keeps here, and if there's anything she might be able to learn from that. So she continues looking a little bit, and then at one point does find like needle and thread, and has this thought about how the domain of the world's heart, which entails kind of putting these different elements of the world together and keeping them whole, if you will, um, she's thinking on that and then thinks to herself, well, what would the coven of elders be? Like, whose realm does that fall under? And realizes that, if anyone's domain, it's probably hers. And so that might be, she might have some power to wield here after all. At this point, Ame then decides to leave and go wander to see what else she can find. Perhaps those other sisters from the past, if she could find their keeps. Anyway, we then cut to Suvi, who is arriving at her wizard chambers, and there we have Maddie, Straw, and Sworn. Maddie, who is the young girl, Straw, who was the helmswoman, and Sworn, who was the older wizard. Suvi takes off the scarf once more, tries to kind of bury it away so they can't hear anything, and she just immediately realizes there's a very weird vibe in this room. Straw seems rattled, Maddie seems like to be blushing almost, and Sworn seems disturbed. So Suvi's like, what's going on in here? And Straw says, nothing happened. And Suvi's like, no, like, tell me right now what's going on in here or you can leave. And Straw's like, I won't be spoken to this way. And she just immediately misty steps out of the room. And Sworn's like, she's lost it. And Maddie says, yeah, I saw her with the Witch of the Wind and Stars. And Suvi's like, immediately just turns to run after Straw. And Brennan asks for a wisdom save. 7 from Suvi, and we're then told that Sworn is casting Hold Person on Suvi. So make another wisdom save. And Suvi hits a nat 20 on this one, and she's trying to figure out, did he just do that to help me or to help Straw? But this is all kind of happening simultaneously. And in that moment, like, Suvi's looking down the hallway and she sees Grimoire just basically eviscerate Straw as she's running away. She like decapitates her with her fangs and then starts like tearing her limb from limb and ultimately like hurls the torso up in the air. I guess like lodging it in the ceiling a bit and then just is like drinking the blood as it drips down from the ceiling. Like, it was absolutely metal and brutal. And Suvi's just kind of standing there frozen. And after Grimoire like finishes feasting on Straw, she picks up the Straw's staff, walks towards Suvi, who does not avert her gaze. She's not challenging, but she's not running away. Grimoire like stalks up, kneels in front of Suvi, holds up the staff, unscrews it, and out falls the contract. Um, Grimoire then just gets up, turns around, and like bounds off on all fours. And Suvi picks up the contract, leaves the staff, and walks back into the room and is like, what the hell? And basically, what they find out is that that like fall in love check that happens with Indri, both Maddie and Straw failed it. And Maddie was like writing a love poem to Indri and she was going to give it to her. But when she did, she saw Straw like kneeling before Indri, pledging her loyalty for her, saying like, I'm done with the Citadel. I'll do anything you ask. And Brennan reveals that this is the result of a natural 1 on that love check, basically. So that's why there was the awkward vibe. That's why Straw was being weird. And Suvi is like, okay, there's nothing else you two can do here. Maddie, Sworn, go back to the ship, use the telemet, report home everything that's happening. And if I don't come back in 3 days, you're to leave without me, go retrieve as much firepower as possible, and come back and scorch this place. And so the two of them leave to go do that. And as soon as Suvi is alone, she basically immediately vomits. And that's where I'll hand it off to you for the second half.
So, Ame then is, just carousing around the Citadel, trying to learn more about the witches. Nothing bad ever happens here, right? And she has her needle and thread, and she eventually makes her way to this room where there's like a large fireplace and a bucket of coal in front of it. And it's around here where her little, I think of like a little magical grasshopper, like the jeweled grasshopper, whatever it's called, jumps out from its cage and lands on the bucket of coal. We find out that she has named this little grasshopper Rin, by the way. And as it lands on the bucket of coal, one large lump of coal basically coughs and reveals itself to be a spirit, a fireplace spirit, I guess. This is Toph, like cough, but with a T. And he has a sort of like this jeweled diamond center and like this coal exterior. And his job is apparently to keep the fires going within the Citadel. The two of them, he's a very sweet character. They have some back and forth where Ame asks like, hey, do you remember grandmother Ren? Like, you've been here a while. And he's like, oh yes, she was always so nice to me. Had that rooster with her. And basically gives like a general history of the Citadel, mentioning that he's been here so long, he's seen every witch come and go, every apprentice come and go, all except for one, Hakea. Hakea is the only one who's never been replaced and is, of course, the oldest of all the witches. Ame also asks about Neef and is kind of like, you know, what's the deal with Neef? Like this whole, it's a weird relationship. And Toph basically says that it's a peculiar circumstance because it certainly doesn't benefit Endry to have an apprentice who doesn't seem to understand magic. Ame points this out as well and says like it just doesn't seem very genuine. It doesn't add up. And then Toph adds that when Endry was an apprentice, Endry was absolutely well taken care of and was trained very well by her witch. We also get a random detail that Ame doesn't seem to, shockingly doesn't like press on, but Toph adds that Endry actually killed her witch who trained her, that she was an apprentice for. And Ame's like, wait, what? Oh, okay, bye. And Toph's like, well, gotta go. And jumps basically back into the bucket of coal. And Ame basically says like, hey, if you'd like, I can keep the fire going for you. And this actually is a really nice gesture to Toph as well. Leaving Ame, we go to Ursulon, who is painting. He has a performance check by Brennan, and Brennan comments that he's actually getting pretty good at painting. He's getting, it's becoming a really great skill set. And then we go back to the sad character of the trio, Suvi, who's sort of walking the ramparts, and in the distance, she sees Sworn and Maddie, Sworn sort of like arms around Maddie, walking both of them up to the deck of the Meridian, seemingly following through with the orders that Suvi had given them. Ame comes up and reconnects with her, and we get sort of the same dialogue of Suvi being a wizard and hating witches, and just she expresses what she saw with Grimoire. Saying hating witches is probably too strong of a way to put it, but what she saw with Grimoire, and basically just being like, what is up with you guys? Like I have tried to extend a hand. I've tried to be like, I'm trying to do the right thing, and yet it keeps getting thrown back in my face. I think there was an insight check that Brennan asked her to do, but Brennan then gives this incredibly beautiful description of how Suvi in that moment realizes that Ame is basically out of her depth. That he gives the example of a kid who's walking like in their parents' boots and is really just trying to make the most of what they have. And it's really in that moment that Suvi's compassion for Ame and empathy for Ame's predicament really grows. And Ame also says like, hey, I know your trust in me is precious, and I want you to know I will not break that trust. Just a very sweet moment between the two of them. Suvi basically responds to that with, I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I'm not going to let them hurt you. The fox pokes up and says, we're not going to run. Like, we're not going to let anything bad happen, which is exactly what Brennan would have someone say before something bad happens, is all I'm saying. And then he has basically Ursulon walking up and just seeing this beautiful embrace with Ame and Suvi. And that is where our episode ends. Episode 28 of Worlds Beyond Number, The Staff. And if you're watching just our recap, you can click the link to get our full episode discussion.